Welcome. Let's come out and play. Okay, this is Tech Talk. This is the usual suspects. And if you want to join the conversation, just give us a call at 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-TALK. And I'm here with Andrew today. My name is Scott Miller. Vlad is on assignment. And we're ready to jump right in and start talking about everything cyber. All right, Andrew, why don't you give us the first story?
Okay, this one is a really exciting one. We wanted to talk about it last week, but we didn't get a chance to. There's always lots going on. There's hundreds of privacy-invading applications that are using ultrasonic sounds to track you. This is kind of exciting. I heard about this, and this technology's obviously been around forever, but now applications are starting to use it. Basically what they're doing is they're using your microphone and your speaker to send ultrasonic sounds to each other so that they can get ranging information, location information, and find out what other devices and applications are listening and around. So it's an interesting thing. It came out from ZDNet, and it's a great article. There's 234 Android apps in the App Store that are all legit, but they also use ultrasonic tones without the user's knowledge. So it's kind of an interesting aspect and another way that they whittle away at our privacy without us quite understanding all the technical implications or implications of it. What do you think about that, Scott?
Well, my first question is, are these even permissions that are listed in the Play Store?
Yes, it would be because it's microphone and speaker. So it needs to have that. But some of these apps, that's part of it. It's part of the functionality for the type. I didn't go through and look at all 234 of them, but it's not surprising how many apps out there that require microphones and so on. When I was deployed overseas working for the Department of Defense and the U.S. Army, I did, just as a little proof of concept, showed how there is applications that you can find in the App Store that it's a clone of another one. So there was this one called Uphill Racer, and it looked exactly like it. And then there was another one that had the same exact icon with a slightly different name. The difference was the other one was written by a Russian, and it requested microphone and speaker permissions. The other one didn't. Go figure. Why would that happen? So you really need to be careful with this type of stuff that you're installing on your devices, even if it comes from the App Store. Look at those permissions, look at who the developers are, look at the reviews and find out the history of it and so on. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to call and ask the usual suspects. We'll tell you if it's legit or not.
Yeah, and the other thing is, of course, if you're not going to ask and you're not sure, don't install it.
Right.
Yeah. And
yeah, the risk is just too great. If you're not sure where it's coming from or what it's going to do, just don't install it. It's not worth your privacy. It's not worth your personal identifiable information, and it's not worth your banking information.
And of course, the other main thing is we've mentioned this many times in our first show. If the product is free, you're the product.
Right. Just like Facebook, they're trying to make money off of everyone else, and so on. It's the way of things.
Yes, and we have some stories about that later today.
Yes, we do.
All right, well, I've got one sticking in the theme of social media. This is off of the ZeroFox blog, and it also made the regular news last week, and that is Russia used Twitter to hack the U.S. government. That's right, President Trump's favorite social media was used to attack the government. And let's see, this was reported on May 18th by Time Magazine, and they managed to distribute the malware to thousands of United States Department of Defense employees. The attack actually occurred in 2017, following instances of alleged election meddling, represents a major advancement in cyber capabilities and an escalation of Russia's cyber war. This is kind of interesting only in the sense that it's state actors now involved and being successful at hacking into the United States government. But actually, cybercrime on social media is nothing new. You know, distributing malware through Twitter is nothing new.
Right.
It's just the potential damage of the attacks here were much larger.
Right.
And so I thought it was worthy of note.
Well, and I think what's changed here, and I saw it working in the defense area, is that the use of social media by the federal government, the U.S. government, and the military in order to get the message out and to raise awareness and all those good things, the footprint has become huge now. So now it's ripe for attacking.
that's true. And well, we'll see what other attack surfaces they're going to use. We'll actually find out mostly from the congressional hearings what was used during the election that to basically affect our institutions.
Right. Well, and there was an interesting thing that came about. There was a privacy application that was finally allowed for the House, the Senate to use, and it's one Signal. That's right. So I don't have the article up, but that was easy to segue into that, and I was excited about that. I tweeted it, I put it on Facebook. I was really excited about that. Like, finally, an actual approved by the government, and it's a safe one. It's a good one. It's been peer audited, reviewed, and it's highly secure. And there hasn't been any major vulnerabilities or any real vulnerabilities for it. And now it's pushed to all of our senators and House of Representatives, I believe.
Yeah, I think the real resistance wasn't that they didn't want secure communication. I think the real resistance is because it has end-to-end encryption, there was no way for employees to be monitored from using it for leaking and whatnot. And I think that the need for secure communication in general finally won out over, this desire for control.
Right.
And this is, what this reminds me of, actually, the Signal debate in the House of Representatives and the Senate and such, is the debate over allowing Gmail inside corporate networks.
Right.
Because you have the same kind of thing. You have networks set up with all sorts of intrusion prevention systems. You have IDS systems. And, of course, with Gmail end-to-end encryption, they're bypassing all that because none of the traffic is able to be monitored since it's end-to-end encrypted.
Right. Well, and we can get into more details on that and explain how to do that right and how to do that wrong. But for sure, I mean, there's Google Docs or Google applications now that are allowed in the corporate workplace. Gmail is now allowed in some aspects. We have the whole bring your own device revolution where people are allowed to bring in their own devices into work and so on. So I've seen both sides of that. And in some ways it's good because it lets us work. In other ways, we're just adding to the attack surface. We're just adding risk and liability. So I think we're ready for our first break. Feel free to call in 1-844-790-TALK and join the usual suspects.
And we're back. Okay, so we were talking about Gmail and Google Docs in the corporate environment and how that end-to-end encryption can defeat a lot of the network security protection that's put in. Now, for smaller businesses and smaller networks that may not even have a server in their environment, it's not as critical that they have whether they use Gmail or Google Docs, because for businesses like that, the main thing has always been endpoint protection. Keeping your system patched, making sure you have anti-malware software and keep it up to date, things like that. There isn't so much of a concern about the firewall and things like that for very small businesses. But in larger groups, and I'm going to let Andrew talk about this, in larger settings, this is becoming quite an issue because they have large investments in both their intrusion prevention and their intrusion detection systems, and end-to-end encryption bypasses all that.
Right. Yeah, there are ways to do that correctly. So, for example, some IDS, IPS systems can, in essence, do a man-in-the-middle attack, so they can see inside some of that encrypted traffic. But it's also one of the ways that malware can creep into your network is with third-party services and so on. There are controls for example, Office 365 and Google applications, Google Docs, and if you have business accounts, you can control what type of content and what certain things that users can do to have better control and visibility of what they're doing with those third-party applications. But you still need to maintain that control. There are new advances in border protection, but don't forget your endpoint protection on your endpoint devices, on your end users, desktops, laptops, and so on. But there are new routers and new firewalls that are out that, without having to break the bank, for small and medium-sized businesses and home users that can do real IDS. And also IPS, antivirus, and so on and so forth. But IDS is important, and I'm going to let Scott explain why that is.
All right, so let's talk about intrusion detection systems for a minute. And here's the issue. There are statistics out that show that when a site is infected with malware, when a business comes under attack and it's successful, the average time until that is found out and remediated is 8 months. So that means someone is hit with malware, and maybe it's turning their systems into zombies for distribution of spam, or even worse, something like child porn, or that you really don't want on your network for a variety of reasons. And it takes 8 months until anyone notices that it's there and starts to get rid of it. So this means that more than intrusion prevention, which is obviously important, we have to spend more time on detection, because the bad guys are going to get through. They only have to be right once to get through all of your defenses. It's kind of a perpetual cat and mouse game for the person who's on defense. And one slip up and there's malware in the system. So intrusion detection becomes much more important. Now, for larger networks, you can use something like Snort, which is very popular, but that requires a significant hardware investment as well, because with modern switches, you have to have some way to replicate all the traffic from the switches to one port that's going to go into your Snort machine. For smaller businesses, you're not going to use something like Snort. And there's a question, I guess really now you have to start looking around on some of the open source project sites. And Andrew, you mentioned one. Was it Wink?
It was called Fingbox. And so, so as there's new advances in router technologies and firewall technologies, the big boys, D-Link, I don't like them, Linksys and Netgear and so on, they are having advances as well as the open source market, and people are doing some stuff off Indiegogo and Kickstarters. This is one of them that I found, and I bought this. I'm waiting to receive it, but it looks like it's going to be a great product. I used their application called Fing for a super long time for network analysis and so on, but they made this little box that's a network security and Wi-Fi device that basically does IDS, or wireless intrusion detection system on your network. It gives you alerts. It gives you identifies bandwidth hogs. It monitors 24/7, and it identifies and detects intruders. So as the malware is attacking, or as the virus is attacking, it can catch it. Or if someone pops on your wireless network, or they get your security key, then it'll let you know what's going on in your network. It's all about network visibility. The newer advances with routers and firewalls will give you some more features so that you can see what's going on in your network, and it'll notify you. That's a big deal. It's notification and visibility. So the Fingbox was something that I found out there for under $100 off of Indiegogo, and it's using open source software and Linux and an Android application and iOS application for Apple users, and it gives you very, very effective means without a fancy router and firewall to give IDS or wireless IDS protection services on your internal network. But for like $300, I know you can get a better router for your home or small business that will give you some IDS features and add that extra layer of protection, plus on top of your normal firewalls and your desktops and antivirus and so on.
And to add to the confusion for people, the other thing you want to check in, even in your home or small business router or firewall, is you want to make sure that the firmware is regularly updated.
Yeah, I'd say at least once a year.
Yeah. I have a Pepcom Wave. I have a Pepcom router, and they're updating theirs, several times a year.
Right.
Now, I'm real happy with that, with their firmware and the updates that they do, but there is a trade-off in features. For instance, mine is a dual-band router, but my model can only operate on one band at a time.
Right.
So you have to choose between 5 and 2.5.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the Asus router lines. I use the RTN66U, which is a dual band router, but it runs Linux inside. So if you're familiar with Linux, you can really get under the hood, but it has a great menu. It supports all the VPNs. It supports IDS, antivirus. It does everything. And it was only $150.
Very good. All right, 844-790-TALK, 844-790-8255. Give us a call. Try and stump the hosts with your tech questions or any other issues that you want to discuss. And the next story it's kind of a privacy story. It's kind of inside baseball to the media market. It's off of Ars Technica. And what this is that BostonGlobe.com now won't let you browse articles when your browser is in private or incognito mode. And how that works is that if you're in private or incognito mode, you either have to disable it to get free articles, or you have to sign in you have to have subscribed and then log in, and then you can browse in either private or incognito mode. And of course, if you're in private or incognito mode and you're logging in, that kind of defeats the purpose of private. So, but this is an issue that's going on in all the media, and obviously being a talk show host, media is something near and dear to my heart. But is how to monitor, newspapers and websites have always been struggling with how to monetize their content at a rate that they're used to. In other words, you can monetize internet content now, but the rate that you get per person is much, much, much lower,
right,
than they got in traditional print media, say. And so their subscription model is becoming much more critical. Whereas before, newspaper prices were pretty cheap. They just wanted to cover distribution because all of their costs to generate the news and was based on getting eyeballs in front of their advertisers.
Right.
So the advertisers were bearing most of the costs. The other thing that you see, not in the Boston Globe, but that this story reminds me of, is I use an ad blocker, as do a lot of people, especially since there has been malware distributed through ad servers that a number of large corporations, including the New York Times.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about.
Yeah, and I'll let you talk about that in more detail. But there are sites that now won't let you browse the articles unless you subscribe if you want to use an ad blocker. The same kind of thing they're doing with private. The difference here that I think is really critical, whereas you could argue before, okay, you're not seeing the ads that pay for the content and you want it for free. No, you either have to pay or you have to see the ads. But this is, you have to give up your private information in order to see the content, which is not really the traditional contract there's been between media and its viewers.
And it's more than just your IP address. It's more than just like the browser type and whatnot. They want your unique browser fingerprint. They want you to log in. They want you to. So my point that I wanted to bring up, and you already started to get on it, was that as a security researcher and a security professional, I see risk and I see liability there. And that's with the ads. Those ads have been used against the end users because they can be infiltrated by malware users or malware generators to not only bump up revenue for their own particular reason or their own particular cause and so on, but they also use it to trick browsers to go to some place to install malware and to get a virus. So I just see risk. I see vulnerability there. So I understand that the media outlets, they're struggling to figure out the new ways to make revenue. I totally get it. I understand. I'm in media as well, so just like Scott said. So I understand where it's coming from, but there's just like Scott, I do agree there is a big difference between the amount of revenue they get off an article versus the number of hits they get off an article on the website. It's very hard to compare. And they're struggling to keep alive. We're losing great papers and great radio stations out there, and it's all whittling away. It's all being lost to the fake news of the internet.
Yeah. I don't know where we're going to go with that because, like you said, in terms of security, I don't think you should be able to penalize your viewers and your audience because they're trying to take care of their systems and be careful.
Right.
By the same token, in any media without ads, there's a lot of content missing.
Right. And it's even gotten the biggest ad click companies such as Google, their entire revenue base. They've been used to maliciously attack their end users that are seeing their ads. And so if Google has trouble struggling with maintaining the authenticity of the ads that are being displayed to the users, then that mainly makes me wonder about anyone else, the ads that are being presented that they could be malicious to my browser and my computer. I'm just not worth the risk. I'd rather not go to the website. I'll close it and go to a different one.
All right, and we're going to be back right after these messages.
Do you need high-quality estate planning and family law services? I'm Reno attorney Todd Torvinen. I practice in the areas of estate planning, probate, family law, and divorce taxation. I'm also experienced in probate and family law litigator and believe that prevailing in any litigation requires diligent, methodical preparation. As a certified estate planning law specialist and certified public accountant, I'm singularly qualified to analyze the financial aspects of marital, family assets, or a decedent's estate. A large part of my practice is done in real time. It means that preparation of estate planning and family law documents occurs with the client present, and they're reviewed with the client at the time the client is there. Your documents are examined line by line and explained to you, then modified based upon your input. This client-focused approach leverages the current technology and enhances the attorney-client communication and relationship. The idea is to produce a better product. Please call me at 775-825-6066 to schedule an appointment today. Again, 775-825-6066.
Call Spirent Dental because you're worth it. They can make your smile perfect. You're gonna love your new smile. Spirent Dental for a perfect smile.
Spirent Dental has a $125 special that includes a cleaning, x-rays, a free Sonicare toothbrush, and a free cosmetic makeover consultation.
Spirent Dental for a perfect
Call
smile.
827-1113.
This is Rick Parr, Director of Sales and host of Talking Sports on America Matters Media. Listen up. We are looking for some good people to sell advertising with us. America Matters Media is our area's community radio network based right here in Reno and heard all over the world with excellent programming throughout the week. If you have sales experience or a great personality with positive attitude and can communicate well, call us at 775-827-8900. We'll train you on how to get the deal done. You'll earn money immediately on every sale you make and on every renewal. The facts are that every business needs help getting the word out about their products and services, and radio ads help them do just that by letting our listeners know where to go to get the best deals in town. We want you to help us bring our clients and listeners together with advertising sales. Call now, 775-827-8900. That's America Matters Media, 827-8900.
Hi there, I'm Hugh Roy Marshall of the Marshall Mint in Virginia City, Nevada. I'm proud to announce that our 7-ingot set honoring the V&T Railroad is now finished.
That's right, Roy. These beautiful 999 silver ingots celebrate the engines from the world-famous V&T Railroad and honor Nevada's sesquicentennial. These limited edition treasures can be purchased only at the Marshall Mint in Virginia City, Nevada.
Or visit us at marshallmint.com to get yours today.
All right, and we hope you enjoyed those messages. We have one more for you. We want to thank our underwriter, Spirent Federal. Andrew?
Sponsored by Spirent Federal Security Labs, where services are structured to produce high-impact results with minimal impact on your organization. Spirent Federal Security Labs has dedicated teams of experienced security professionals offering comprehensive scanning, penetration testing, monitoring services for networks, wireless, websites, mobile applications, embedded services, as well as static source code analysis. Contact Spirent Federal for your complete range of security services at spirentfederal.com.
Okay, and now, let's see. Where were we before the break?
We were talking about privacy, and I'm just chomping at the bit for the next one.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm an avid pilot, radio control guy, and I've been flying ever since I was a little kid. For me, the whole drone and quadcopter thing is not a big deal. I've been doing radio control stuff since I was a little kid. So now everything's called a drone. And a while ago, back in 2012, there was a law passed that said that we had to register our semi-autonomous radio-controlled helicopters, such as quadcopters, aka drones. So as of the 19th, they finally deliberated it extensively in the courts and in Congress and so on. Americans no longer have to register non-commercial drones with the FAA under 55 pounds. Lord have mercy. So if you buy a new drone in the U.S., to fly non-commercial, you no longer have to register your drone. And you had to before, UAS service, the Unmanned Aerial Service. And there was another gentleman who I'm very fond of who hosts a conference here in Washington, D.C. called ShmooCon. And he said he refused to register it. And I was like, well, I just want to be Mr. Legal Beagle and don't want to get in trouble. And he said, no, it'll change for sure. Don't buy into that. Just boycott it. Don't sign up. And here it is years later, they finally dumped it, and they found that the law was actually completely illegal. So they've taken it off the books, and so there's now a new approach that the FAA is dealing with it, and so it should be a lot better for the hobbyists and for the end users. If you're not professional, you're not trying to make money with your radio-controlled aerial unmanned aircraft, then you're A-OK under 55 pounds. Definitely look at FAA.gov and get the rules, but it's an exciting change.
All right. Unrelated to this, I want to point out a couple things in what Andrew just said. First of all, the attitude of I'm going to keep my privacy because I know the rules are going to catch up with me. And the second part of that statement is it only took years. So, if you're trying to protect your privacy and your personal information and things like that, it can be a rough and lonely road. But,
right.
And that's why we have the trade-offs we have. And, we were talking last week about actually where there shouldn't be any trade-offs, and that's in children's protections. Right. And that brings up another story I have, and this is I'm wondering if there's going to be a backlash in Facebook, as this article suggests, and that is Facebook, as we know, tries to do targeted advertising. All the online advertisers try to do targeted advertising to distinguish themselves from the mass media. So we know that they try to do this, but what they've started to do, and this is kind of a little sleazy, is that they're targeting children. So they have to be above 13, so starting as young as 14. And they're saying to advertisers, we can deliver you 14-year-olds who are upset, or 14-year-olds who think that they're embarrassed, or 14-year-olds who think their life isn't worth living. These
low
are exactly,
self-esteem, or
yeah. These are exactly the words that are in the Facebook document.
Wow.
And that's taking it to a new level.
Hey, your children might be having trouble in life. Let's target them with ads.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit about the in some ways, and just in a humorous way, it reminds me of the Target story where the father went all crazy because they sent his teenage daughter coupons for prenatal vitamins and diapers. And he said, how can you send this to a teenager? And then it turned out the teenager was pregnant. And
wow.
the data management program at Target knew it before the father did.
Wow. Right.
But this is, like I said, this is taking it to a new level. And I'm not really sure I'm comfortable with that level, but I don't know, other than, not using Facebook, which is not really an option for most kids, and you can only control it up to a certain age, and then they can have their own accounts.
Right. Right.
But, just those privacy settings become so important, and you've got to review them regularly. Now,
definitely for your children's stuff and your own stuff.
Yeah. Now, the terms of service are written in lawyerese, so they're really hard to go through. So what I would recommend is subscribe to Twitter or whatever with the Twitter feed of like EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, or the ACLU, because they have lawyers who go through when there are changes in terms of service for big popular services, and they'll put out articles and they'll put out tweets about what has changed. And more importantly, they'll often include where you can go in the settings to put it back to the way it was or to modify it in some way. Before this change in Facebook, which actually isn't a change to their terms of conditions, they've just found a new way to exploit their data as is. My biggest concern lately was the fact that my videos were playing with sound whenever I scrolled past them, rather than, but this is a much more serious move.
Right.
And so,
right. They get sneakier and sneakier every time. Not only ways to just innocuously make you just look at the screen and like accept, and just run through the settings. The permission settings when you install an app. A lot of times people don't realize that they're giving access to all that information on their phone and to different devices such as microphones, so they can listen and so on. Yeah.
And for listeners out there, I guess I should do full disclosure. I give away a lot of my personal information. I am not really big on my privacy, and here's the reason though, is I think until we hit the loss of privacy is about 20 years from now where it's really going to be the generation now that's coming up without this real good idea of privacy. They'll be in their prime. They'll be running the world. They'll be the generation that's running the world.
God
and
forbid.
I'll be much older. I'll be beyond a senior citizen at that point. So I'm thinking that my time on this planet runs out before my privacy is really gone. But that only applies to my generation. People coming behind me, they have to really start thinking about all these things.
Well, and the way that I do it is I have some things that are private, and I keep a lot of my life very private. But the other way that I do it is I am vocal on social networks, social media, and so on. And I do have a presence online and so on. But a lot of that I do like Foursquare and Swarm and stuff like that. Yeah. It's mostly disinformation. If I'm going to Starbucks at such and such address, I'll check in at the restaurant down the street. And, so I would say 75% of that stuff out there could be disinformation, could be real. But, hey, I'll let you figure that out. But the things that
if you're really interested in privacy and stuff and some of the things you can do about protecting your personal information, go to geekslv.com. That's GEEKSLV.com. And in my blog there, you'll actually see you'll see a blog that hasn't been updated since we started doing this show. But you'll see that last year I did like a 10-part series on privacy and security for your personal information on the internet. And so you can take a look at those blog posts, leave a comment if you want. And of course, you can always call in here, 844-790-TALK, 844-790-8255.
Yeah, feel free to call in and try to stump us with your tech questions. I've been doing technology since I was a kid. I've also been doing it professionally since my early 20s, and I'm getting up there. So I've been doing this for quite a while. I welcome all questions and comments, and feel free to hit us up with your tough tech problems, and we'll be happy to help you out and give you the answers.
Okay, so I'm going to see if I can start some conversation here with our listeners, because I'm going to tread lightly, but I'm going to actually tread on something that touches politics. So
I got another one it's kind of political, but yeah.
So President Trump issued a cybersecurity executive order last week.
Oh, it was horrible.
Well, you see, that's the thing is it wasn't too horrible, at least in my opinion.
You're right. You're right. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right.
But the thing is if you care to look at what was horrible about it and not horrible about it, all you need to do is look at the Obama cybersecurity order, because it's really kind of a copy. And so if you were happy with the old one, you'll be happy with the new one. If you weren't happy with the old one, you won't be happy with the new one.
Well, and it wasn't like I was a big fan of Obama or whatnot. I definitely wasn't. But the differences that I saw is that Trump had absolutely no way of implementing it. And Obama actually had half of it implemented and got a CTO appointed and got a cyber czar appointed and did some things to kind of do that. It was progress. It wasn't perfect. But Trump's document, it all sounds great, but there's actually nothing behind it to get it done. Like, it all sounds great. It's like, it's all glam and glitter and the gold ivory tower, right? But I didn't see any substance on how to actually get it implemented.
Well, my response, of course, and then I'll leave this, but I can't resist. You're talking about someone who still wants to use Steam on aircraft carriers.
Well, that's the thing. I was arguing that with someone else too. That those technical decisions, shouldn't be made by the president. He really shouldn't concern himself. That's my opinion. But he should trust his generals. He should trust his engineers to say that that's what they need and want, and go for it. But yeah.
So if we've riled anybody up, 844-790-TALK. Because we're not going to stay on politics long. All right. You know what? Hold your next story, Andrew, because we're pretty close to a break.
No problem.
So we'll just take our break just a few seconds early. Okay. Welcome back. 844-790-TALK. 844-790-8255. We'll take your tech questions. You can talk about any of the topics that we've brought up today, or you can bring up your own, anything cyber. We're ready to discuss. All right, Andrew, we were talking about things related to the cyber order that the president signed before, but we want to move on now. And the one thing I want to bring up real quick is Google is, of course, got its hand into everything.
Right.
And one of the things they have is they have an AI lab, an artificial intelligence lab, and they have a computer called AlphaGo. And AlphaGo actually is playing a tournament now against a world champion Go player. And AlphaGo won the first game. So this is kind of like, you know, a chess playing computer beating a chess master. Now, granted, it was only one game, and so we'll see what happens in the series of 3. But this is a big improvement for artificial intelligence.
Right. Yeah, they're getting much faster. Elon Musk, he's got a lot of interesting things to say about it. I have, being the old school person that I am, I would like to slow down on some of that. I think we kind of need to catch up to where our technology is taking us, but I also like my gadgets. I also like the way that they help my life out and so on. But I think artificial intelligence is a real threat to us in a sense that we start putting guns in the hands of them, and computers started making life and death decisions for us. Like, I'm all for automation and whatnot, and vehicles with some automation, but I am a pilot. I'm a driver. I want to be able to make that life and death decision. I don't want software doing it, because if the car crashes, they're going to still hold me liable for it anyways. So I want to make this. Go ahead.
To steal a joke from The Big Bang Theory, and when the computers rise up, ATMs will lead the charge.
Right. Absolutely. So I saw an interesting piece of articles that I thought that was interesting, not only to cybersecurity and national security and so on, but it's just something I wanted to bring up if you guys don't mind. April 3rd, there's an article from BBC that came out saying CIA operations may be disrupted by new WikiLeaks data release. Imagine that, which is pretty common. Quite often, the WikiLeaks that have come out are targeted to mostly, if not all, only the United States of America. And then here it is, another article comes out May 21st showing China's crippled CIA by killing U.S. sources, says the New York Times. So now we're seeing that there are intelligence gathering apparatus is being seriously affected by our means to gather any types of intelligence on our allies and our potential adversaries. I believe China is a great ally. They have a huge industrial base, and we share a lot of business back and forth. They own a significant part of our debt, I believe. So, I mean, there's good reasons to stay in business with China, and it also keeps Russia in check. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and the frustration I see and how people praise WikiLeaks and stuff like that. But in actuality, these leaks are getting people killed.
So let's talk WikiLeaks, because I'm really torn on this. And I must admit, I started out as a WikiLeaks fan, and now I'm not a WikiLeaks fan.
Right.
And let me explain how I came to that decision. So originally, when WikiLeaks leaked material from Chelsea Manning,
right,
I was somewhat torn. I was somewhat of a fan, and that was based upon my comparison of them in my mind to Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers, which shows you how old I am.
Right.
Because that goes back to the 70s.
It's a very relevant time in our history.
Yeah, and the idea was, but there were some key differences. Number one is Chelsea Manning was not a lifelong government servant, public servant, who was frustrated by, the government's dishonesty with the American people, which is clearly what Daniel Ellsberg was, and what he gave as the rationale. The second thing is that he leaked all this stuff. He leaked it to the New York Times, and the New York Times, went through it before they published it all. So they didn't, they were much older documents, so there wasn't so much about intelligence gathering and stuff in them for most of what it was. They were just, factual dichotomies between what they were telling the press and the American people and what the statistics really were. So that was a little different than with WikiLeaks, who just published them without filtering them.
Right.
And I was a little troubled by the idea, well, if you're just publishing them without filtering with them, why don't you just dump them all at once? What was with we did this dump, then we did the next dump, then we did the next dump? That really didn't make sense to me if you're not editing them in some way.
Right, right.
But I was still defensive of WikiLeaks, because, well, government misdeeds need to be brought to the fore somehow, and that only happens if someone leaks. I mean, that's kind of a fact.
Sometimes. I mean, I agree. Yeah. But even me working inside the government, I had good results working with the Government Accountability Office. I had good results working with the Inspector General. I had good results working with commanding officers who took security serious. There are ways to actually work within the system to do this. It's not perfect. It's a lot of things that go unchecked and so on. But yeah, it's the whole. One thing that I point out about how WikiLeaks rise came up is that their biggest thing was that collateral murder video. And I point out that video was an encrypted video stolen from a JAG officer's computer. A JAG officer who was investigating whether that was a legitimate action in combat. And so it wasn't like this big cover-up. It wasn't like the government was doing anything wrong. It's like, yes, war is ugly. The fog of war is ugly. Bad things happen. That's the reality of life. And I point that out to people, and people don't always get that. They think that it was all high and mighty and, bad government, bad America, covering up, shooting journalists. No, not at all. No, that's the narrative. That's what they want you to believe. And in another show, we'll talk about that more because I had a play in that as well with WikiLeaks. But
what turned me against WikiLeaks was their part in leaking the information that affected the election. And when I say affected the election, I mean affected our institutions. And I'm not getting into whether it favored one side or the other. The fact is it was made to make us distrust our institutions, no matter who you were supporting. And in that way, it succeeded.
And if you read Russians' doctrine on that, it is exactly what their doctrine is. It's to make distrust. It's to make to split party lines. It's to split. It's to break down the actual fabric and the foundation of what makes our country great. Freedom, openness, and sharing information, and
But what got to me is clearly there was a personal agenda.
Oh, absolutely.
That didn't that took away from the idea of we're leaking for the greater good. Not. That's not what was happening here. So
and remember, every time he would say that, he'd say, send us money. Send us money. I mean, I still say it. They used Manning for foreign nationals to profiteer off of state secrets. I mean, how else can you look at it? They profiteered. He made millions off of it. And so he gets to sit in the Ecuadorian embassy trying to avoid rape charges, which I think they were dropped because they couldn't get anywhere with the case. But there's still a ton of other pending charges against that guy for good reason.
All right. Before we leave today, I want to talk about a couple things off topic because, even cyber people shouldn't live under a rock. And so I want to talk about a couple events in the news that happened just recently. The first, of course, is the bombing in Manchester, which has us all pretty much upset and on edge. And there are, Andrew, you were saying during the break that there's still 8 missing.
Yes, there's still 8 children missing. They're listing the people that are still missing on BBC.com. You can get more information about that as they go through the carnage and the wreckage and to find the children and to find other victims and so on. They're still being treated at the hospital. And so as our allies and just mutual good humans on this planet, our hearts and thoughts go out to the Manchester victims and the whole United Kingdom. We stand together with you.
Yeah, and it just brings home the Western countries for a long time have been relatively safe havens, and that's becoming less true these last few years with Paris and now with Manchester.
Right.
And then the other small story is out of entertainment, and that, of course, is Roger Moore died of James Bond fame. Actually, he was also the Saint, going back to that series.
Oh, was he really? Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was one of my favorite Bonds. I saw that news this morning, and I was very sad by that. He's a great Bond. He was so dapper, so much presence on screen, and generally off screen, he was a great guy. He had a great family. Everyone had great things to say about him. He wasn't ever in any scandals that I remember. And he was a hero of mine. You know, he was a great guy. And I've had a lot of cancer in my family, so I was very sad to learn that he fought cancer briefly, and he was 89 years old. That was amazing. He was doing his films for decades and decades. Even his first Bond films, he was in his 50s or so.
I didn't know that. That's one thing I didn't know, and I was amazed when you mentioned that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He's a fantastic guy and made great movies. So definitely this weekend, or when time permitting in between work, I'm going to be watching some Roger Moore, James Bond movies. So be thinking of that guy.
All right. So just before we go, favorite James Bond movie with Roger Moore?
Cannonball.
Okay. And mine is Moonraker.
Moonraker. Oh, that's a great one. Now, that's one of my favorites too, because of the shuttles and like it's all crazy. And it's got Jaws in there. Jaws is a great presence in that film, and he's got his little blonde girlfriend, and that was a great show, Moonraker. But Cannonball, I really enjoyed. It was great. So, yeah.
And I urge you to get, for those of you who want to see more of his body of work, I urge you to get, I think they're still available on Netflix, The Old Saint. If not, they're probably somewhere pirated on YouTube, because it's a black and white show.
Right.
And we've just got a few seconds left. I want to squeeze in one more story, and that I can only squeeze in the headline, and that is on Samsung S8s, the eye security that goes with the camera, it was fooled by a photo.
Right.
So
yeah, it's really
I just
good.
want to remind everyone, don't use the retinal stuff and the thumbprint stuff on your tech.
It's all spoofable. It's all fakeable.
Use a strong password. Use a strong password.
Absolutely.
And
thank you for listening, everybody.
I want to thank everyone for listening.